Y'all don't look at me. I'm trying not to draw attention to myself this morning. Trying to be as incognito as I can possibly be. Some of you laughing, some of you are frowning. I'm not sure how to take that. Are you wondering what's happening here? There's nothing wrong with me this morning. Nothing at all. I've got everything hidden. Nobody knows, and if I walk down the street, nobody pays any attention because I don't draw any attention myself because I got everything hidden this morning. And I don't know what all this noise is. It keeps coming up, but I don't know exactly what it is. It's not anything I'm doing. I know that because I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't know. Okay. I can hide that too. You know what we're going to talk about today? I got cameras coming out today. Now that's different. Good morning, everyone. I know that it's a little bit different. I'm going to talk about some of the things that my father left me. It's going to wind up being a good story, y'all. It's going to wind up being a real good story. As y'all know, my father was a preacher, was a pastor of a church. Shh, be quiet. But he wasn't always a preacher and a pastor of a church. There were times whenever he, kind of like me, maybe even like you, I don't know, that everything in his life wasn't exactly the way he was whenever he was a preacher and a pastor of a church. Not that you're a preacher or a pastor of a church, but we're going to celebrate Jimmy Buffett this morning. Now, you want to know what that segue is about? You know what this is? This is me calling attention to myself even though I'm trying not to. Simply because I got all my stuff hid, you see. I got my jacket on, you can't see anything. You don't have any idea what my challenges are in life. You don't have any, because I've got it all, I covered it all up, right? And I'm not trying to drag any attention to myself at all. Anyway, changes in latitude versus changes in attitude. You know, that's the Jimmy Buffett song. That's why I say we're going to celebrate him. I don't know if he's a father or not. He probably is, much as he's traveled around the world. I know. Well, listen, that's where I come from, and that's part of what we're going to talk about this morning. We're going to talk about some of that stuff. All right. Well, let me tell you, first of all, what we are going to talk about is the things in my life today that that I've run away from. Things that I've run away from because I covered them up and they didn't exist, right? I call it my baggage. One of the first things I tried to do in my life with my baggage is I tried to make sure that nobody knew I was coming so they wouldn't know. And then when my baggage got too heavy, what I decided to do is I changed locations, you understand? Because whenever I changed locations, I know that the people where I was going, they had no clue because I had everything covered up so well. They had no clue what was going on, right? You know what I found out, though? I found out the strangest thing. Everywhere I went, I found out I was there. Now, I know that sounds a little bit strange, but think about it a minute. That's pretty profound. That's almost profane, in fact. In some areas, that's what it became, in fact. But, you know, when I was at work, guess what was there? My baggage was there. I might have had it covered up, but it was there, and I knew it was there. When I went to social events, sometimes my baggage hung out a little bit too much, but my baggage was there whenever I went to social events. In my relationships, and Lord knows you're going to find out today I had a bunch of them, but in my relationships, my baggage was there. I tried to cover it up, and I tried not to warn people that I had it. But sometimes the bell would ring, and people would find out, and then I'd have to move someplace else. So, I went to Kentucky. Guess what I found? I found my baggage was there. Whenever I got there, it was already there. Or at least it came with me if it wasn't already there. It seems like it was already there, but it seemed like it got there before me. So I ruined that, with a whole bunch of stuff and so I decided, I'd go to Georgia. All things are better. It's peachy in Georgia, right? Everything is peachy in Georgia. Well, I found out that my baggage was there whenever I got there, too. Or either that or it followed me. I'm not sure which. But it seemed like it was there by the time I got there. It was really strange because I knew I had it covered up pretty well, just like I do this morning. I had it really covered up well. And for some reason or other, people, I don't know whether it was I forgot to leave the bell at home or what, but something happened. So, I decided I'd go to Nevada because, what's in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. You've heard that, right? So what's in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. So I went to Las Vegas. You know what I found? My baggage was there. I don't get it. Everywhere I went, my baggage was there. And so what I thought, well, hey, here's what I'll do. I'll go to Texas. Texas is big. Texas, nobody's baggage can be found in Texas, right? Because it's too big. I've heard you could. Well, I'm not going to say what you can do in Texas, but I'd say what you can't do in Texas. You can't leave your baggage because it was there. I went to Texas, and my baggage was there. And then I found out, of course, that some of my baggage I got from somewhere else. It was called ancestral baggage. My dad was a preacher. My mom was a wonderful woman, and y'all know that. I thank my dad and my mom for leaving me with some of the best things that ever a person could be left with, and they all are represented in the book, like Jim is about to hold up now. That's the one, yeah. And anyway, they left me that. But my dad, I love my dad. He passed away some years ago, and he left me some stuff, what I call in my ancestral baggage, things like alcoholism. Now, my dad was a preacher. He wasn't an alcoholic. But remember, he wasn't always a preacher. He wasn't always as good a husband as probably what he wanted to be. And where I want to take you this morning is I want to take you through some of the baggage that I found myself with. And I want to take you all the way through it with a few little anecdotal stories. And then I want to show you where it ended up, by the way. And it ends up in a good place because there's a scripture that takes care of that. Addictive behavior. My dad brought some addictive behavior. There was a time when in my dad's younger days, and I've told you the story about my grandfather committing suicide when my dad was 6 years old and stuff like that. So, and my grandmother did whatever she could to get by, and she had like 5 husbands and who knows how many boyfriends. And so, they brought that stuff to me. That's my ancestral baggage, you understand. It came in with a short temper. You know where a short temper comes from? A short temper comes because of what's going on inside of you, by the way. It's not what's going on outside of you. I know you think sometimes that other people say or do things that make you get angry. That's not what makes you get angry. It's what's inside of you that makes you get angry. That's for another day, but just write that down. Next time you get angry, write that down and say, who made me angry? It wasn't a person that just said or did something to you. It was a person inside of you that made you angry. Anyway, that's for another day. Rebellion. My dad brought that because my dad was a hard-living man when he was young. Let me put it that way. He was a hard-living man, and he had a lot of rebellion that he brought to his family from the ancestral side, and stubbornness. Now, I don't know that any of you have ever experienced stubbornness, but I did, and my dad did, and so as a result, he passed all of that ancestral baggage down to me. Now, I will tell you that I was able to cover it up very, very well. just like I have today. I've covered it up well, and you can't see it. You don't know what's going on. But I was able to cover so much of it up, but I couldn't cover it all up. And so we go past my ancestral baggage now till we get some of my own baggage. This is what I call my chosen baggage. You know, when you go to the store, you're going to go on a trip, you're going on a vacation or something like that. You know, you go to the luggage store and you pick out. Generally, my wife loves to pick out pink stuff. And she said, "Don't you like this? Isn't this great? Isn't this lovely?" And what am I going to say? I'm going to say, "Of course, it's beautiful once you get it." No, I was thinking of it for you. Well, I don't know that I want to take it, but I think it would be great for you, you understand? Anyway, that's what you choose to take with you, right? What you choose to pack your stuff in to take with you. Well, what I did, that's why I call it today my chosen baggage. This is my chosen baggage. Some of the things that I chose, by the way, to stuff in my suitcase and to cover up, of course, were, number one, now I know I don't want to offend anyone's sensibilities this morning, but I've not always been perfect. Now, the person you see in front of you today, you know, I've got it all covered up well, you understand. The person you see in front of me, I'm pretty perfect. But not always been perfect, you understand. There's been a few clouds in the background. There's been a few times in the background when maybe I should have made a different decision and I didn't make a good decision. And one of those things, one of the pieces of baggage that I chose was something called adultery. Now, what I'm going to tell you this morning is all in the Bible. And I'm going to give you the scripture at the end of this, and you're going to see all of this. I thought I was immune, you understand, because when I was growing up, my dad was a preacher, and he was a pastor in church, and he did teach me the Bible, and I knew that stuff, and it was pretty cool, you know. And I could do a Bible debate with about anybody and probably win for the most part, but it wasn't internalized, you understand. So there's some things you need to internalize. Well, this is not one of them, by the way. So some of the baggage that I began to choose was adultery. I want to tell you just a little bit of. I'm not going to give you details of all this because if you go back a slide or two, you'll find out all those states that's about. You know, I've been on all the states, but I've been in a whole lot more states too. Some of them I can't go back into. You probably won't. You wouldn't know that here. You understand, but there are some states that are probably best to stay out of. I didn't list those states in that slide. Those are states I think I can go back to, but I'm not real sure. But I think I can go back to. And part of the reason is because of the baggage that I chose to pack in my suit, the stuff that I chose to pack in my suitcase. And one of those things was adultery. I hate that, by the way. I hate that. And I got to tell you up front that whenever I talk about this stuff, I've never even met Brenda. So at this point in my life, I didn't meet her till later on in my life, after my life began to straighten up, and I kind of had a better thing going. So don't feel sorry for her, right? All right, all right. At any rate, there was a time, by the way, and I don't know where I got this. I have no idea. I don't know if it came from my ancestral baggage or what. But there was a time when I kind of felt like you've heard this term, God's gift to women? Who's laughing about that?
We all are.
Andy's got his hand up in the air as high as he can get it. I understand you. I understand the problem, brother. I do understand the problem. I really thought that at some time, and you understand, the women didn't help that. They really did. And I've decided, by the way, that in some circles, not in this circle, you understand, we're all better than that here. But in some circles, you can hang a guitar around a monkey's neck. Put him on stage, and I promise you that somebody's going to love him. Anyway, that was me. I was the monkey. And so you know, I had a lot of help in that, but I certainly didn't have any hindrance in that as well. And so what I wound up doing, and this is what we're going to talk about, I ran from one to the next. I ran from one person to the next person. I just ran from, as soon as they found out a little bit about what I was about, I'd run to the next person because I wasn't about to let them get too close. And that wasn't what I was about. I was about running to the next person. And so I did that. And that was a part of the baggage that I chose to do. Another piece of the baggage that I chose was to act as though what other people thought didn't really matter. And be honest with you, that's in the Bible, by the way, just in case. There's this long word in the King James Version of the Bible. It's also in the New King James. I don't know if it's in any of the other ones. I didn't look at all of the. There's like 1,200 versions of the Bible, but in the King James, the real version of the Bible. Thank you very much. I'm just joking, y'all. Okay, I'm just joking. Whichever one you have, it's good enough to come to me and ask me what the King James says. Come on, we'll have fun with it this morning. Anyway, it's called lasciviousness. And it just means a behavior with a lack of concern about what other people think. And I want to tell you a story that's heartbreaking. It ends up good, you understand, but I want to tell you a story that's heartbreaking about my lasciviousness. And that is that my behavior was a complete lack of concern for what other people think and how it affected other people. I have a son in another state that is now 41 or 42 years old. I can't really remember. But anyway, I think he's in the 40s anyway. Let's put it that way. And he's a great fellow. He's a great guy. But I didn't give him a whole lot to start with. He was born back in the early 70s. And there are 12 years in high school, you understand. And if you go back to the previous chosen baggage that I talked about just a moment ago, and I ran from one place to the next. Well, my son was a beneficiary of my lack of concern. In 12 years, he attended 14 schools. Now, that is a complete lack of concern for what other people think and what other people do. There is no other way to put it. That is complete lack of concern. That is about as far into what I would call lascivious behavior as a person can go. Now, I want to tell you the good piece of that story, and that is that he came through it, he came out of it, and God blessed him and restored him because God restored me later on. And he's doing great now. He's still in another state. He found out what he wanted to do at a young age. He's never done anything but that. The one piece of good advice I think that I ever gave him was, he asked me, what do you think? He told me, Dad, you always know what you want to do. You always wanted to be a musician. He said, but I don't know what I want to do. He said, what can you tell me? I said, and this is when he was a teenager. I said, well, I'll tell you what you do, son. You figure out what you will do for free. Then I will help you find somebody that will pay you to do it. And that's what he did. He figured out one day what he would do for free, and he went and did it for a year for free because he loved it so much. And then I helped him find somebody that paid him and that's still paying him to do that, and he's doing an absolutely wonderful job. He's a cop, by the way. Why anybody would want to be a cop, I don't know, but he wanted to be that was his thing. He wanted to be a cop, and he's a good one. He's an absolute good one. I did get a Father's Day picture from him yesterday with a dog. He is now in the canine unit, and his new partner is a little bit hairy. And I asked him how he liked it. He said it was fine, except he always had hair on his uniform now, Now, you have to know this child, this 40-year-old child, he does not like to be messed up, period. Period. No messy stuff going on. His tennis shoes are always perfectly white, all 112 pair of them, and he loves shoes. And he just doesn't like to be messed up. So now that's a big deal to him. He has a canine friend now that has to be with him 24 hours a day, and he has hair on his uniform. And it was a big enough deal for him to mention that to me. Well, I don't know how much of that I left him, but I do know that even through my lascivious behavior, God was able to make something good out of it. And I thank God today on Father's Day for that, for being the things that that I'm talking to you about today. You put your own stories to them, by the way, because if you haven't ever done it, God bless you. Don't ever do it. If you have, just know this, that God can make something good no matter what the case is and no matter what the story is behind it. Another one of the pieces of chosen baggage that I had was worshiping music more than God. Now, that in the Bible, that's called idolatry. I've told y'all this story. For those of you who may be new today and you haven't been here, what we're doing is we're going through my life, and I've been telling you my story as we go through life, but not just for the sake of telling you my story, for the sake of finding out how it applies to the Bible. Because as you recall, my mother had only one answer to every question. No matter what the question was, my mother had one answer, and that answer was, let's see what the Bible says about it. It used to make me so angry that because it made me so angry, I went and learned what the Bible says about it before I went and asked the question. Well, thank you, Mother, because it has held me in good stead. Now, of course, before I ask the question to myself or anyone else, I have the same thing. Or if somebody else asks me the question, I have one answer. Well, let's see what the Bible says about it. So I've become my mother in that respect. In a lot of other respects, I've become my dad, because for a lot of years I listened to him preach and talk to people, and I enjoy. I used to fantasize, by the way, being able to do a revival or something with my dad. We did it one time after I got saved. We did it up in Virginia one time, so I got that fantasy to come true after I got saved. But before I got saved, one of the things that I worshiped more than God was music. So whenever I did get saved, I thought I had to give up music. I've told you that story as well. But I didn't have to give up music. Let me tell you what I had to give up. Back in, let's see, let me think of, where was it? It was, I don't remember the exact year. It was before my son was born, so it was before 1971. In 1971, I did record a record. I should have brought that record this morning. It's just a 45. Some of you that are old as I am, you know what a 45 is. Nowadays, I don't think they have a 45. But I took a job out of Nashville, Tennessee, working for Tree Publishing Company. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tree Publishing Company or not, but they're a very big songwriting and publishing company in Nashville, Tennessee. And I took a job writing music. Writing country songs, of course. I had a country life. My dog bit me. My pickup truck broke down. My wife left me. What else can we think? Anyway, if it happened, I was living a country music life, so I was a pretty good country music songwriter. So I took a job with Tree Publishing Company writing music, and I had a partner. They always partner you up with someone because they figure two ideas are better than one, and we used to sit up all night long writing music, patting on the chair or whatever. We'd pick up a guitar and we'd try to write things, and we did write some things. We had one song Jim Croce did one time, and just a few little odds and ends that made sense. But it was an all night, all day thing, day after day after day, and then After writing music for a little while, I decided to record some things, right? To write my own songs and record some things, and that's where I should have brought the 45 this morning. I have one copy left, by the way. You can't buy one. They're not in print anymore, so don't get too excited. It wasn't all that. Now that I go back, I don't have even anything to listen to it now, but it wasn't all that. But I thought it was all that back then. And so I had been writing music all day and all night for a few days, and I had gone to a different, a show. I went to a Bill Monroe bluegrass show in the process of all of that, and then I went to the recording studio for that, and I had been up for, I don't know how long I had been up, but I had been up for a long time. And they have little things that help you stay awake whenever you. Let me pull that one off. I don't want you to know about that. That was addictive behavior. Anyway, I'm going to pull that one off. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that part. But at any rate, I had been up for a good long while, right? And so I went in the studio and I recorded side A of this song that I had already, or this record I had already written. I had another side B that I was going to record. Well, somewhere in the middle of the recording session, I decided I didn't like side B. I don't know why. I can't recall now. I have an idea that I was out of my mind. I didn't know what I was doing. But at any rate, I decided to write a new side B in between recording side A and side B, right? So I wrote a whole new song. I just sat down and wrote a whole new song to record, and I recorded that on side B. Neither one of them was very good, by the way. One of them was called Wasting Time. That was the hit side, by the way. And the other one, I think, was called I Just Live for Today Until Tomorrow Comes Around. All right, so that gives you an idea of what I was worshiping at the time, right? It was called idolatry. I was worshiping other things more than God. I know none of you maybe have never experienced that, but just in case you've ever had that thought or you've had something that is more important to you than God is, there's also a good piece of ending to that story. God can take that and make something out of it. As a for instance, this morning, I only know of 3 mistakes I made this morning on the keyboard. I'm serious. One was when I got up and turned it on, but aside from that, I'm not aware of but 2 other mistakes that I made on the keyboard this morning. And I'm not going to tell you what those were, because if you didn't hear them, Dana, if you didn't hear them, I'm not going to tell you. But I had something that I worshiped more than God, and that was called idolatry. And it took me down a path that I didn't want to go, but it took me down a path that I went anyway. So I ran from what we call gigs, by the way. I ran from gig to gig to gig, never stopping long enough to let anybody find out what I was really about. Hiding all of my baggage, of course, as I went, so that nobody would know that what I was bringing to the party. And I did bring a lot of stuff to the party because there was a lot of party that went on. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I went from gig to gig. Another thing that I chose, it's interesting that this one decided to fall off at this moment, because that's the very next one that I'm going to talk about. It's called rebellion. If you remember, if you go back to my ancestral baggage, you'll find that that's a part, stubbornness and rebellion is a part that was in my ancestral lineage and ancestral heritage. But I wasn't satisfied with my dad's rebellion. His rebellion wasn't quite as good as mine. I wanted my own, so I chose to have my own rebellion. I chose to look different, to be different, to act different, to make everything me, personally about me. It was about me, thank you very much. It wasn't about, if you talked to me, I couldn't even remember your name because it wasn't important to me. If you asked me a question, I probably told you the answer, because that was important to me, to be able to tell you the answer, because I knew everything at the time. And if you don't believe it, you could ask me. And I would tell you that. I know it's hard to see that person standing in front of you today. I realize that. But he was there. He was there. He truly was there. Some of this stuff is hard for me to get through with a straight face, by the way. It's all true, by the way. It is everything I'm telling you is absolute truth. I would not tell you a story. Well, I'll tell you a story, but it'll be a true story. So I did rebellion. I changed my look. I had a long hair. In fact, some people, they used to call this kind of hairdo I had was a page boy. Anybody ever heard of a page boy hairdo? I had one of those, believe it or not. Bill, you know what I'm talking about? I didn't pull it back in a ponytail. That's what they do nowadays. But I didn't pull it back in a ponytail. It actually flipped up on the end. It was just kind of the cutest thing you ever saw. It was just awesome looking. And I had one little curl, that come down here and kind of like a Superman curl. If you've ever seen the Superman movie, you had the one curl that came down in front. I had that little thing there, and I had to flip up on the end. That was my page boy. Well, keep in mind that that's the way I looked at, and I was a little bit scrubby looking because back before it was in vogue, I didn't shave every day, and sometimes it would get a little ragged looking. Well, anyway, point is, in my rebellion, by the way, rebellion, in case you've never had it, in the Bible, it's compared to witchcraft. Let's put it that way. It's not witchcraft, but it is compared to witchcraft. Rebellion. My son was born that I told you about a little while ago, and my mother, by the way, I hadn't seen my mother at this point in probably a number of years, at least 3 years. And because I hadn't gone back home, I didn't need to go back home. I had everything I needed and knew everything I needed to know. So I never went back home. I didn't have anything that they could teach me at that point. And so my mother decided to fly up to see me and to take care of the brand new baby, right? What an awesome idea, and I appreciate it so much. So I went to the airport to pick her up. And I'm standing at the airport. I'm waiting on her. This is when you could go back to the gate. This is a while back, obviously. You could go back to the gate and you could wait for them to come out of the jetway, whatever they call that. And I'm standing there and I'm waiting for my mom. Now I didn't have a sign or anything. I didn't need one. I didn't think. As it turned out, I needed one because my mother came down the gangplank, and in my rebellion, I had changed myself so much that my mother walked past me. And I'm talking about closer than me and you, Trent, but as close as me and Jim here. My mother walked past me, looked right at me, and didn't know who I was. That wrenched my gut just a little bit. Just a little bit. That was like, what have I done to myself that my mother doesn't know who I am? I had to call after her and go catch her for her to know who her own son was. Because in my rebellion, I had changed who I was into something that she didn't even recognize. There's a good ending to the story, by the way. I'm going to tell you what that good ending is. Years and years later, my mother was just had a few days to live, and she knew it. She wasn't sick. She was time. That's all. And she had a sweater of many colors. Now, the sweater of many colors was something that Brenda and I had bought her from Cracker Barrel. Now, you know it wasn't much. Wasn't much at all. But it was something that she loved dearly. And it was from a son that she now recognized. And when she got ready to say her final goodbyes, I have one of my sisters who was the person who took care of all the arrangements, that sort of thing. She told that sister of mine, she said, I want you to lay me out in my beautiful pink dress and put that sweater from Cracker Barrel on me over my beautiful pink dress. Because I want everybody to look at that and know that my son, who was lost, came back. And I recognize what he is now, and I recognize him. And there was a little more to it than that. But that's the rebellion went away, and something good took its place. And from that, God was able to make something of a life that didn't have a life before. God was able to take something that wasn't recognizable and make it something to be proud of. God was able to take my baggage that I wore around so proudly, thinking I had it all covered up, but it was all hanging out all over me. Everywhere I went, I rang a bell to let people know that I had some severe baggage and I was coming through. God was able to do something with it. Then one other piece of baggage that I want to go over with you this morning is simply called excessive, boisterous lack of moderation. That's called reveling in the Bible, by the way. Back in the day, you've heard that, right? Back in the day, when I was hanging around the music industry and loving it, not knowing why, having heart problems and not realizing why. Anyway, all kinds of stuff was going on in my life. I used to hang out with a hee-haw gang. Anybody remember the hee-haw gang? There's a few of us old gray-haired people. Anyway, you don't remember the hee-haw gang? Anyway, I used to hang out with a hee-haw gang because I was working out in Nashville. Now, I wasn't on the hee-haw show, television show, but I played with some of the folks that were on there, and I used to hang out with a hee-haw gang. And the reason I'm telling you this story is this story is about the excess. This story is about the boisterous behavior. This story is about the lack of moderation. This story is about the reveling that goes on in our life if we allow ourselves to be in control. And that's what it comes down to. Anyway, I used to hang out with a hee-haw gang. And I never forget Junior Samples. You remember Junior Samples? He told the stupid stories, and he held a sign up that said BR 549. Anyway, he would he had a difficult time remembering his lines. And so after every hee-haw show, there would be a party. I would go and would hang out, and some guy thinks he's Jerry Lee Lewis would try to play the piano, and Junior Samples would stand over in the corner trying to read his lines and memorize his lines, and he would stay there forever, say BR 54. Anyway, those twins that had the long hair were there, whatever their name was. I used to remember their name, and I can't remember. Anyway, during those parties, there was excessive behavior that was going on continually. And it would go on for hours and hours and hours and hours. And then at the end of that, of course, we'd all go someplace and we'd crash. Now, if you go back and take a look at all the baggage that I had chosen, and then you add to that all the baggage that I had gotten from my ancestral side that I hadn't cast off yet, you can kind of see where some of that led. You take the excess, you take the lack of moderation, and you add to it the rebellion, and you add to it the lascivious behavior, and you add to it the adultery, and you add to all of those things blended in to make a person that wound up being a person that my mother couldn't recognize whenever she passed me in the airport. The point I want to make this morning is all of that, all of our baggage, can make us a person that God can't recognize. But He wants to recognize us. And even if we have something in our life that is not exactly the way it should be, God can help us deal with it. He did me. I have given you some extreme examples, but they're all real in my life. And God has taken that thing which is horrible, which is awful, and He's been able to change it into something that He can be proud of, that He recognizes. I'm not saying I'm any good today, because I'm not. But what I am saying is Jesus is, and I have accepted Jesus. And because I have accepted Jesus, all of the baggage that I had, that I was carrying around, that I thought I had all hid, and was hanging out all over me, all of that baggage winds up being covered by the blood of Jesus. And it don't matter what it was or where it was. It doesn't matter where it was or what it was. Doesn't matter how hideous it was. Doesn't matter how difficult it is. Doesn't matter how hard it is to deal with. It's still all been covered by the blood of Jesus. And you know where I am today? We have been, by the way, in today's message, we have been going through Galatians, the 5th chapter, just in case you don't know. Galatians, the 5th chapter, tells my life story. It truly does. It tells my life story. It says, now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envies, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like. And I didn't tell you about all of the stuff. I just told you about some of the and the like. That's what we've been going through. Galatians told my life story. But thank God that's not the end of the story. Because there's another verse after this, the 22nd verse of the 5th chapter of Galatians, that says, where I am today. Go ahead. Keep going. Go one more time. Go one more time. There is one more. Thank you. God forgave me. He accepted my commitment. And He sent a princess into my life. He did. And that princess, of course, is in this audience. She knew all the baggage that I had before she ever decided to accept me as her husband. But she knew that I had already allowed God to help me conquer that baggage. You wouldn't look at me and look at my past and say we had a 5% chance of doing anything right. But God has taken our life and made something out of it. And this is what He's made out of it. This is where I am today. The fruit of the Spirit is love. That's what I feel today. I feel every day. With everybody. Joy. Joy is not happiness for the moment. Joy is something that is internal. You can be happy and you can laugh and not be joyous. You can be sad for a circumstance and situation and still have great joy. Peace. Jesus said when He went away, He left His peace with us. I have that peace. If you wonder why I don't take Valium anymore, if you wonder why I don't get angry. If you wonder why anything I do is what I do, it's not because of me, guys. It's because of God. The peace that He left in my life through all the jumbled up garbage that I chose as my baggage over the years. Long suffering. It's going to be really hard for you to get me upset or for you to make me think badly of you. Because I can't. I have been to the bottom of the well and God drug me out. You're not going to make me feel bad toward you. You're not going to. It's not in there. I can't. I think you're marvelous. I think you're fantastic. Even if you're going through things in your life that you wish you could get a handle on, I still think you're fantastic. Because I've been there, done that. And if you'll keep going through, the optimum word there is through. Going through means you're not stuck in. So keep going through. People say, I'm going through hell. Pardon me my language there for a second. Keep going because you'll get out of the other side. Don't stop in it. Go through. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those are all, by the way, fruit of the Spirit. That's in Galatians 5:22 and 23. The part above that, in 20 and 21, that's the story of my life. Galatians, the middle of the chapter. And I dare say that you can find yourself in there somewhere. And if it's not totally in 5:22 and 23, keep going through it. Keep going through it. Give your heart, your life, your everything to God. And you will get there because you will not stop while you're in all that stuff that's up above it. Go through it. Next time we're going to talk about learning to live with me and my issues. Now, where I am today, and I thank God for it, as I've told you, it is not because of me. There is not strength within me. But where I am today, I had to learn to be. Because all of that stuff that I've talked about today, I had to learn to live with. I had to learn to be able to stand in front of you and say, this is who I was, but this is who I am. And to do it in a way that gives God the glory, in a way that honors the kingdom of heaven, and in a way that hopefully gives anyone else hope that might have issues that they need to go through or issues that they need to deal with. Next time we're going to talk about how it is that I learn to live with who I am. The flawed character that I have, the sin nature that I was born with, and the godly wisdom that He has chosen to give me because I ask Him for it.